The music swelled. The guests rose from their seats, and the white veil fluttered in the wind like a dove. All eyes turned toward the bride, walking down the aisle. But just as she passed the arch of roses, a sharp growl pierced the romantic silence. Ranger, a retired K9, lunged forward, teeth bared, and clamped onto the hem of her dress. Gasps erupted. Cameras dropped. The groom's face froze. And in that exact second, a life was saved. It was the kind of day you read about in bridal magazines. Clear skies, golden hour lighting, and a pristine outdoor venue nestled in the hills of upstate New York. Pinewood Estate had been the dream location for Emily Carson and Derek Hayes ever since he'd proposed under a similar sunset 3 years ago. The oak trees swayed gently around the ceremony site, wrapped in fairy lights. Guests in pastel attire mingled, sipping sparkling rosé. Classical music floated from the string quartet tucked behind the hydrangeas. And yet someone wasn't smiling. Ranger, a 9-year-old retired German Shepherd K9, sat rigid near the front row, ears forward, tail still. He wasn't meant to be part of the wedding, not really. He had come as a +1, invited by Emily's Uncle Bill, a retired police captain who never went anywhere without him. Ranger had been a hero once. He'd sniffed out narcotics, tracked down missing children, even saved a life during a hostage crisis. But after his handler died in a car crash last spring, Ranger had grown quieter, more watchful. He trusted very few people. Emily was one of them. "I swear he can read emotions," Bill had joked the night before. "More than some humans I know." That morning, while everyone rushed around prepping flowers, dresses, and champagne, Ranger had paced the bridal suite's doorway with growing tension. He barked when the young bartender brought in a silver tray of pre-ceremony cocktails. He sniffed obsessively near the lace train of Emily's dress and let out a low growl when Sophie, the maid of honor, entered with a small velvet pouch of lipsticks. "Is your dog okay?" Sophie laughed nervously, brushing her hair back. "He's kind of intense today." "He's fine," Emily said, petting Ranger's head. "He's just protective. I think he senses I'm nervous." But it wasn't just nerves. Ranger's behavior was off. He kept circling back to the same corner near the champagne flutes, his nose twitching. When one glass clinked too hard against the other, he jumped slightly. Not like fear, more like calculation. Emily had been around animals all her life. Her family ran a small rescue shelter in Vermont when she was a kid. She knew when something wasn't right, but the last thing she wanted was drama. Not today. At exactly 5:45 p.m., the ceremony began. The guests stood. The music shifted into canon in D. Emily stepped forward from the back patio, veil in place, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. And Ranger stood up. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply began walking beside her, silent as a shadow, eyes locked ahead. It wasn't until she reached the final stretch, just 20 feet from the altar, that it happened. Ranger's ears flattened, his body lowered, and in one sudden, swift movement, he bit the hem of her dress and pulled. The fabric tore slightly. The veil tipped forward. Emily gasped, nearly stumbling. The crowd gasped. A few people yelled. The wedding planner, Claire, dropped her clipboard. "What the hell?" Derek shouted, rushing forward. "Get that dog away!" someone cried. But Emily didn't scream. She looked down, into Ranger's eyes, and saw something that made her stop. Not aggression, not confusion, but urgency, desperation. "Wait," she said, holding up a hand. Backstage chaos followed. Emily was gently ushered into a side room to calm down. Derek paced furiously outside. The guests waited awkwardly, murmuring. Inside the bridal suite, Emily sat on a velvet couch, still holding her bouquet. "Uncle Bill, what was that about?" she asked. Bill knelt beside Ranger, examining his posture. "I don't know. He's never done that before, not without a reason. That's what scares me. Ranger moved again, sniffing near her dress. But this time, he nudged something. A wine glass, one of the glasses from the pre-ceremony tray. The one she had taken a sip from 10 minutes before walking out. The one she barely touched because it tasted off. Emily picked it up. Her hands trembled. "Bill, can dogs detect poison?" Bill stiffened. "Some. Ranger used to train for that kind of thing, at least with certain substances." The door opened. Claire, the wedding planner, peeked in. "Everything okay? Should we continue in 10? Emily hesitated. "Can I see the rest of those champagne glasses? The ones from earlier?" Claire blinked. Most of them were taken away, but I can check with catering." Love stories like this, where animals save the day, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals, where real courage has 4 paws. A few minutes later, a young catering staffer brought in a tray with 2 untouched glasses. Ranger sniffed the tray, then froze, his ears pinned back. He let out a single, low bark. Bill took 1 glass and poured the contents into a clean white saucer. "It smells like almonds." Emily blinked. "But this is sparkling wine." Bill nodded grimly. "You know what else smells like almonds? Cyanide." Silence. Emily dropped the bouquet. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply sat still, watching Ranger with wide, haunted eyes. Someone had tried to poison her, at her wedding, in public, in front of everyone. And the only one who knew, the only one who tried to stop it, was a retired K9 with a scar above his right eye and more loyalty than anyone in that crowd. Emily stood up. "Call the police." "You should call the police," she said. "Now!" The wedding never resumed. By 6:45 p.m., most of the guests had been ushered inside the reception hall under the guise of a weather delay. But the sun was still shining. The real storm was happening behind the scenes, between half-sipped champagne, trembling hands, and a German shepherd who refused to sit still. Emily sat in the lounge of the bridal suite, her dress slightly torn at the hem where Ranger had bitten it. Her fingers fidgeted with the lace. Her fiancé, Derek, stood on the far side of the room, pacing in tight, irritated circles. "I don't understand," he muttered for the 3rd time. "Are we seriously postponing our wedding because a dog growled at a glass of wine?" Emily didn't answer. She was still staring at the saucer, the one Uncle Bill had used to pour the champagne. The smell of artificial almonds still lingered faintly in the air, enough to keep her stomach twisted. "Someone put something in that drink, Derek," she said finally, her voice low but steady. "And if Ranger hadn't—" "That's ridiculous," he snapped. "You think someone tried to poison you? At our wedding? Are you hearing yourself?" Uncle Bill stood quietly in the doorway, arms crossed over his dress blues. He hadn't worn his formal uniform in years, but he'd brought it out today. "For the last wedding I'll probably attend," he'd joked that morning. He wasn't joking anymore. "You think I'm making this up?" Emily said, standing now, her voice rising. "No," Derek replied too quickly. "I think you're overreacting. Or maybe you're nervous, and the dog just made it worse." Ranger growled softly. Emily looked at him, not Derek, but Ranger, and said, "He's never done anything like that without a reason." "Never." Derek rubbed his face. "This is insane. Shouldn't we be getting married instead of talking about poison and dogs?" Emily didn't respond. Her eyes had drifted to Sophie, the maid of honor, who stood near the window, stiff and silent. Sophie had been quiet the entire time, arms folded, lips tight. Her lavender dress, elegant and sleek, didn't match the deep lines of concern now creasing her forehead. She'd been Emily's best friend since high school, the kind of best friend who helped plan every detail of this wedding down to the last petal. Now she was acting like none of it mattered. "Soph," Emily said, "can I talk to you alone?" Derek started to object, but Bill stepped forward. "Let them." They stepped into the hallway, just past the flower arch that never got used. Ranger stayed behind, reluctantly. The hallway smelled of hydrangeas and rosewater. Emily leaned against the wall and looked at her friend. "Tell me the truth," she said. Sophie blinked. "About what?" "You know something. I saw your face when I mentioned poison. You didn't even flinch." Sophie looked away. "You're just stressed." "No," Emily said firmly. "Don't do that. You've never lied to me. Please, don't start now." There was a pause. Then Sophie exhaled sharply, as if releasing something that had been clinging to her ribs. "I didn't want this to happen," she whispered. Emily's breath caught. "Didn't want what to happen?" "I didn't know it would go this far. I thought she was bluffing." "Who?" Sophie hesitated. Her eyes filled with a mix of shame and fear. "Claire," she whispered. "The wedding planner." Back in the reception tent, Claire was rechecking floral arrangements with mechanical efficiency, pretending like everything was fine. She smiled at guests. She laughed at nervous jokes. But every few minutes, her eyes flicked toward the back entrance, as if watching for someone. Or something. Ranger had been let loose from the bridal suite and was now circling the catering tables outside the tent. His tail was stiff, his steps deliberate. One of the catering staff, a tall young man in a black vest, noticed and reached down to pet him. Ranger growled. The man recoiled. "What's with this dog?" Bill approached. "You know dogs. They know what they know." The young man shrugged and backed away. Meanwhile, inside the hallway, Sophie's words spilled out in a breathless rush. "I wasn't part of it, I swear. I didn't even know the details. Claire told me she wanted to delay the wedding. Said it wasn't safe for you. She said Derek had been lying to you for months, and that if I really cared, I'd help her." Emily's eyes widened. "Lying about what?" "I don't know," Sophie whispered. "But I believed her. She made it sound like she was trying to protect you." "So you let her drug me?" "No, I didn't know that part. I thought she was going to, I don't know, fake a power outage or something. Ruin the music, cancel the flowers. Not poison." Emily stepped back, visibly shaken. "You should have told me," she said. "I was scared." At that exact moment, a scream pierced the courtyard. They both ran out. The crowd was gathered around the drink station. Claire stood there, pale as chalk. Ranger had tackled the same black-vested catering guy and was now holding him by the ankle, not biting, just pinning him, Bill rushed forward and showed his badge. "Let him go, Ranger." Ranger obeyed. The man stood, brushing himself off. Claire shouted, "This is insane! Someone needs to remove that dog." But then Emily arrived, and she wasn't looking at the waiter. She was looking at Claire. "Why?" Emily asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Claire's face twitched. "What are you talking about? You told Sophie you wanted to stop this wedding." "I don't know what she told you, but—" "And I tasted cyanide in my drink." Emily cut her off. "Ranger smelled it. My uncle tested it. That's why he bit my dress. He was trying to stop me." Murmurs rippled through the guests. Claire's poise faltered. "That's nonsense. It was probably just a bad bottle. You think I tried to kill you?" "You knew about Derek," Emily said. Silence. Claire blinked. "What? You dated him years ago. You still hold a grudge." People turned. Emily took a deep breath. "You didn't want me to marry him because you're still in love with him. And maybe you found out something I haven't yet. But this? Poison? You crossed a line." Derek stepped forward, stunned. "Wait, Claire?" Claire's face hardened. She turned to walk away, but Bill blocked her. "You'll wait right here," he said. "Cops are on the way." Ranger sat beside him, panting gently. That night, the wedding never resumed. The guests slowly filed out, murmuring about what they'd seen. Derek tried to explain himself to Emily, but she wasn't listening anymore. Not because of Ranger, but because of the truth. Later, while sitting alone in her torn dress with a glass of untouched wine beside her, Emily whispered into Ranger's fur, "You knew before I did, didn't you?" Ranger just lay quietly beside her, like he always had. Watching. Waiting. protecting. The wedding venue looked different the next morning. The white roses along the aisle were wilted from the overnight dew. Chairs that once held smiling guests now stood crooked, abandoned, like pieces of a dream that never fully came true. The floral arch was still up, but the air around it felt heavy. Not from weather, but from what had happened underneath it. Emily sat on the stone bench near the koi pond at the back of Pinewood Estate, her wedding dress folded carefully beside her. She wore jeans now, her hair in a messy bun, her bare feet dipped into the pond as the orange and white fish glided beneath the surface, unbothered by human chaos. Ranger sat beside her, alert but still, like a statue made of loyalty. No one knew what to say to her that morning, not her mother, not the officiant, not the venue staff who quietly began tearing down the decorations. Uncle Bill had stayed overnight with her in the guest house, making calls, talking to the authorities, reporting the incident. Claire had been taken into custody. The waiter, the one with the black vest, had been cleared. Apparently, he'd just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, a temp hired last minute. It was Claire who had brought the champagne tray into the suite. It was Claire who had offered to double-check the final details. And it was Claire who had been in Derek's past and maybe never truly left it. But there was still so much Emily didn't understand. Later that morning, as sunlight filtered through the sycamores, Uncle Bill joined her on the bench with 2 paper cups of coffee. "You sleep at all?" he asked. "Not really," Emily replied, eyes still on the water. "You?" "I've been a cop for 30 years, Bill said with a shrug. "But watching you walk down that aisle and watching that dog stop you," he paused. "Let's just say I've had better nights." She smiled faintly. "You think she really meant to kill me?" Bill didn't answer right away. He handed her the coffee, then scratched behind Ranger's ear. "I think people do desperate things when they feel powerless," he said. "I've seen it before. It doesn't always make sense, doesn't always add up. But yeah, I think she crossed a line, whether she meant to kill you or just scare the hell out of you." Emily sipped the bitter coffee. "She said she was trying to protect me, that Derek had secrets." Bill nodded. "Then maybe you should find out what they are." By noon, the police were gone, the catering truck had pulled out, and Derek was nowhere to be seen. Emily walked slowly through the now empty ballroom, past the tables set for a party that never happened. Cake still sat untouched in the corner, a 3-tiered vanilla monstrosity topped with tiny figurines of a smiling bride and groom. She stood there for a long time before finally reaching into her purse and pulling out her phone. 1 missed call from Derek. 2 unread messages. She opened the first. "Emily, I had no idea Claire was still this obsessed. I'm sorry. I don't know what she told you, but none of it is true." The second was longer. "I wish we could just talk without everyone else involved. I love you. That hasn't changed. Please, let me explain." She stared at the messages, thumb hovering over the screen. Then she pressed call. Derek met her at a small coffee shop 10 minutes down the road. A place with warm lighting, dusty bookshelves, and the kind of smell that never quite leaves your sweater, cinnamon and dark roast. He wore a navy jacket over his wrinkled dress shirt from the night before. His eyes looked tired, but not guilty. Not exactly. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat across from him. Emily nodded but said nothing. He hesitated. "You look beautiful, even without the dress." "Don't," she said softly. "Don't charm your way through this." Derek sighed. "Okay, let me just say it. Yes, I dated Claire. It was years ago, way before I met you. We broke up because, well, she wanted more. A ring, a life. I didn't." "She said you lied to me," Emily said. "That there's something I don't know." Derek shook his head. "Claire was always manipulative. She knew how to twist things. She probably wanted you to believe I was cheating or hiding something." "Were you?" His silence lasted a second too long. Then, "Not cheating, no, but I didn't tell you everything." Emily sat back. Derek ran a hand through his hair. When Claire and I broke up, she didn't let go easily. She used to show up at my office, send me letters, threaten anyone I dated. Eventually, I had to get a restraining order. You never told me that. I didn't want to scare you off. I was ashamed. I thought it was over. Emily looked down at her coffee. And the job? The one you said you left last year? Was that connected to her? He looked away. She filed a complaint, said I was harassing her at work. Even though we didn't even work in the same department, HR got involved. I left quietly. Figured starting over with you was the best path forward. Emily sat in silence. She felt like she was trying to hold sand in her hands, everything slipping, no matter how tight she squeezed. You should have told me, she said finally. I know, he replied, but I didn't want to ruin what we had. Emily stood. It's not the dog's fault this wedding didn't happen. It's yours. She left without finishing her drink. Back at the estate, Ranger waited for her under the sycamores. She dropped to the grass beside him, burying her face into his fur. You're the only one who didn't lie, she whispered. Ranger nuzzled closer. That evening, as golden hour rolled back across the property, Emily did something no one expected. She returned to the courtyard, still in jeans, her dress forgotten. She lit the candles on the tables. She placed a speaker in the center. And she played the song that had been meant for their first dance. Not for Derek, not for the guests, but for herself. Bill joined her 10 minutes later with Ranger by his side. You sure about this? He asked. Emily smiled through the music. Yeah, I never needed a groom to feel complete. Just a reminder that someone still has my back. Ranger barked once, as if on cue, and under the fading light of the wedding that never was, the bride danced. Not to forget, but to remember who she was before all the lies. It had been 4 days since the wedding that never happened. The headlines had already started trickling out. Bride saved by retired K9 after poison plot at estate wedding. Former police dog uncovers attempted murder in New York ceremony. Local news stations aired footage of Ranger sitting calmly beside Emily, while Uncle Bill answered reporter questions on the estate's driveway. Emily had refused to speak to the press. She didn't need strangers turning her pain into prime time. Instead, she stayed at Uncle Bill's cabin near the lake, a quiet spot tucked into the pines where the birds outnumbered people and the cell service came and went like a ghost. It was the one place she'd ever felt safe growing up. And for the first time since the wedding, she could actually breathe. But Ranger didn't rest. Every evening around 6 p.m., he'd pace the edge of the tree line, nose twitching toward the breeze, ears perked. It was as if he were still waiting for something. Or someone. That Thursday morning, while Uncle Bill fixed a leaky pipe in the shed, Emily sat on the porch sipping coffee. Ranger lay at her feet, eyes wide open. I still don't get it, she said aloud, not expecting an answer. If Claire was so obsessed with Derek, why try to poison me in front of everyone? That's not love, that's something darker. Ranger huffed, his tail thumping once against the floorboards. Uncle Bill walked up the steps, wiping his hands on a rag. You want my theory? Emily looked up. Always. She was never trying to kill you. I think she wanted you to faint. Maybe collapse. Cause a scene, ruin the wedding, sure. But not die. Why? Because then she could play the savior, comfort Derek, get back in his life. That kind of manipulation doesn't scream killer. It screams control. Emily stared into her cup. That's even worse. Bill nodded. In some ways, yeah. Later that afternoon, a knock came at the cabin door. A uniformed sheriff stood outside, holding a slim manila envelope. Miss Carson? Got something here you might want to see. Came from the county prosecutor. Emily took it with shaky hands. Inside, a printed record of Claire's last 90 days of financial activity, her phone call log from the week before the wedding, and a copy of a rental agreement for a temporary office space in Brooklyn, Emily flipped through the pages until something stopped her cold. A payment. 2 days before the wedding. To a catering subcontractor. The name listed? Sophie Lang. Emily didn't cry. Not immediately. She stared at the name for a full 5 minutes, while Ranger shifted beside her, sensing the change in her breath. When Uncle Bill returned, he didn't need to ask. He just sat beside her and waited. "She lied to me," Emily whispered. "She said she didn't know Claire was going to do anything dangerous. But she took money from her." Bill leaned forward. "You sure it's the same Sophie?" "She only ever used her mom's last name for paperwork," Emily said. "Lang, that's her." Bill exhaled. "Well, time to pay Sophie a little visit." Sophie still lived in the same one-bedroom apartment she'd had since college. It sat above a bakery and always smelled like cinnamon and cigarette smoke. Emily had spent dozens of sleepovers there, watching rom-coms and sharing secrets until sunrise. Now, standing in front of the old door with Ranger at her side, Emily felt like she'd swallowed gravel. Sophie opened the door looking pale, like she hadn't slept in days. "Em," she said, "I was going to call." "Were you?" Emily asked, holding up the envelope. "Before or after I found out Claire paid you?" Sophie stepped back. "I didn't ask for money. She gave it to me." "That's not better." "I was scared," Sophie blurted. "She said if I didn't help her, she'd ruin me. I have student loans, Em. I live paycheck to paycheck. She said it would just be a little theatrical interference. She promised nobody would get hurt." Emily's voice dropped. "You're supposed to be my best friend." "I didn't know about the poison," Sophie insisted. "I thought she was going to ruin the flowers. Maybe fake a kitchen fire, I swear." Ranger growled softly. Sophie backed up, afraid of the dog now more than Emily. "I lost everything that night," Emily said. "My wedding, my trust in people, my future with someone I thought I loved. And the whole time, you were helping her." "I'm sorry," Sophie whispered. "I was stupid." "No," Emily replied, turning to leave. "You were selfish, and that's worse." That night, Emily sat alone by the lake, watching the moonlight dance across the surface. Ranger lay beside her, his head resting on her lap. "What do I do now?" she asked quietly. "How do you start over when even your friends were part of the lie?" Ranger didn't move, but the way he leaned into her was answer enough. "You don't go back, you move forward, with those who never left your side." The next morning, the district attorney's office called. Claire had entered a plea deal, no trial, no public hearing, but a full confession on record. She admitted to lacing the champagne with a small amount of a non-lethal sedative mixed with alcohol. Dangerous, but not deadly in the dosage. She named Sophie as a reluctant participant. Emily declined to press charges. But the confession included one more name, Derek. According to Claire, he knew what she planned. Not in detail, not the drink, not the method, but enough to suspect she would sabotage the wedding. And he didn't warn Emily. The news hit like a gut punch. Emily sat motionless as the DA read her the line from Claire's statement. "Derek said he didn't care how I stopped the wedding, just that it didn't happen. He told me, if you want her out of my life, go ahead. Just don't get caught." Uncle Bill looked like he wanted to throw the phone through the wall. Ranger just barked, once sharply, as if to say, "I told you so." Emily didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, "I almost married him." That evening, she opened her laptop and typed out a message to the local newspaper. She included a photo of Ranger at the wedding, standing proudly by her torn dress. The headline read, "The dog who saved me from the wedding that should have never been." In the story, she didn't mention Claire's name, or Sophie's, or even Derek's. She just told the truth about how a retired K-9 saw what no one else wanted to see, and stopped her from stepping into a life built on lies. By the weekend, the article had gone viral. Comments poured in from people who'd had their own Ranger moments, not with dogs, but with gut feelings, silent warnings, or loyal friends who stepped in when it mattered. And Emily? She still didn't know exactly what came next. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't walking into it alone. The town moved on faster than Emily did. A week after the story broke, Pinewood Estate was booked again for another wedding. New flowers, new bride, new dreams, as if nothing had ever happened between those oak trees and candlelit aisles. But Emily hadn't returned to Pinewood. She stayed at the lake house with Uncle Bill and Ranger, waking early to walk the woods, drinking black coffee from chipped mugs, and ignoring calls from nearly everyone, except her dad, who called just to ask what Ranger ate so he could buy it, in case he ever adopts a hero. Emily laughed. It was the first laugh in days. One foggy Tuesday morning, as she sat by the window sketching, something she hadn't done since college, a knock came at the cabin door. Ranger was up before the second knock, tail stiff, body alert. Emily peeked through the window and sighed. Sophie. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied back, loosely braided the way she used to in college when she was stressed. She held nothing in her hands except maybe guilt. Emily opened the door, saying nothing. Sophie stood there, eyes red. I know I have no right to ask for this, but can I talk to you? Emily stepped aside silently. They sat on the porch, like they used to when they were teens, legs curled under them, hands wrapped around warm coffee cups. But now there was a canyon of silence between them. Ranger lay between them, choosing to rest at Emily's side. I read your article, Sophie said after a long pause. It was beautiful. I didn't write it for you. I know, Sophie whispered. I needed to say this out loud. Emily stayed quiet, waiting. I should have walked away when Claire asked me to help, Sophie said. She manipulated me, sure, but that's not an excuse. I made a choice. Emily's gaze didn't soften. You were supposed to be standing next to me that day, as my friend, not as Claire's pawn. Sophie nodded, swallowing hard. I kept telling myself that it wasn't real sabotage, that it was just delaying the wedding, not destroying it. But when Ranger pulled your dress and I saw your face, I realized you could have died. You could have. Emily closed her eyes. Why didn't you stop it? I was afraid, Sophie said, voice cracking. Afraid Claire would ruin me. Afraid you'd hate me if I ruined your big day. And if I'm being really honest, part of me wasn't sure Derek was good for you. But I should have come to you. I should have trusted our friendship enough to speak up. I failed you. Emily looked down at Ranger, who had dozed off, one ear still twitching. You didn't just fail me, she said softly. You failed yourself. They sat in silence for a while, only the wind rustling the pine needles. Then Emily asked, Do you regret it? Every second, Sophie whispered. Emily nodded slowly. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said. I don't know if I ever will. But thank you for coming here, for saying it out loud. Sophie wiped her eyes. I deserved worse. Maybe, but you came, and that counts for something. She stood, signaling that the conversation was over. As Sophie reached the end of the driveway, she turned one last time. You've changed, Em. Emily tilted her head. Good or bad? Stronger, Sophie said. You're not the girl I used to know, but maybe that's a good thing. Later that night, Emily and Uncle Bill sat by the fireplace while Ranger curled up with a chew toy by the hearth. She came, huh? Bill said, sipping his whiskey. Emily nodded. She said what she needed to say. You say what you needed to say back? I did, Emily replied, and I still feel hollow. That's grief, Bill said. You're grieving what should have been. Not just the wedding. The version of people you thought you knew. Emily leaned her head back against the old armchair. How do you stop that? You don't. You just let it pass through you, like a storm. They sat there a while, firelight dancing on Ranger's fur. The next day brought more mail. Most of it was junk. Catalogs, donation requests, flyers. But one envelope stood out. No return address. Just a single word written in all caps. Sorry. Emily opened it cautiously. Inside was a letter. Emily, I know you probably never want to hear from me again, but there are things you deserve to know. Things I should have told you long before this mess happened. Claire wasn't lying when she said I wanted out. I just didn't have the guts to say it. I let her do the dirty work, hoping the fallout would make you hate me instead of me having to hurt you directly. I never deserved you, and I knew it. I lied about more than the job. I lied about why I left my ex, about money, about how I saw our future. You wanted real things, Em. Roots, honesty, safety. I wanted convenience, a pretty wedding and a smiling bride, but not the commitment behind it. You deserve more than that, and more than me. Don't respond. Just move on. Please, be happy. D. Emily read it twice. Then she fed it to the fire. That night, she pulled out her old camera, the one she hadn't used since college art class, and drove to the field behind Bill's cabin. The sun was setting low, casting golden light across the grass, and Ranger ran through it like he was born for that hour. She snapped photos until the sky turned lavender. Later, as she reviewed them, she saw one that stopped her breath. Ranger, mid-run, fur backlit like fire, eyes bright, ears flying. In the background, wildflowers blooming, unexpected, untamed, like something surviving what was never meant to break it. That photo would be the one Emily would eventually frame in her studio when she opened it 6 months later. It would hang above her desk, not as a memory of the wedding that fell apart, but of the moment everything real began. Summer faded gently that year. The mornings grew cooler. The lake turned still, as if holding its breath between seasons. Goldenrod bloomed along the dirt road leading to Uncle Bill's cabin, and the smell of wood smoke began to return to the air. Emily stayed, not because she had to, but because it gave her something that New York City couldn't. Space to feel everything without judgment, to walk barefoot in the woods, to sip hot coffee in silence, to breathe without performance, and most of all, to be with Ranger. The retired K-9 had become her quiet shadow, trailing her down forest paths, sleeping at her feet as she painted, and sitting like a statue each time the mail truck pulled up, as if still guarding her from unseen threats. But it wasn't just protection anymore, it was partnership. In mid-September, the lake town held its annual Harvest Festival, small-town charm at its best. Hay rides, kettle corn, cider stands, and a homemade pie contest judged by the fire chief's wife, who nobody dared to argue with. Emily hadn't planned on going. Crowds still felt like too much. But Bill nudged her. "You've been hiding long enough," he said. "Besides, Ranger deserves his moment." So she went, wore jeans and a navy sweater, tied her hair back, let Ranger ride in the back of the truck with his head out the window, tongue lolling in the wind. They pulled up to the fairgrounds just after noon. People noticed them immediately, or rather, they noticed Ranger. Someone shouted, "That's the hero dog from the paper!" Kids rushed over. Adults pointed. The mayor, an elderly man with a voice like a creaky floorboard, shook Emily's hand and gave Ranger a ribbon. "He saved you, didn't he?" the mayor asked, smiling. Emily looked at the dog sitting calmly beside her, tail sweeping the grass. "No," she said. "He saved the part of me that still believed in people." Inside the event barn, Emily wandered past booths selling homemade candles, wood carvings, and jars of pickled everything. At one table, a woman sold hand-stitched aprons with embroidered sayings like "Bless this mess" and "Caffeine and kindness." One apron caught Emily's eye. It was simple, pale blue, with just 4 words. "Start over with grace." She bought it without thinking. By late afternoon, she and Bill sat on the tailgate of his truck, sipping apple cider, while Ranger dozed nearby in the grass. "You know," Bill said, "you could have turned bitter after all this. No one would have blamed you." Emily nodded. "I almost did." "What stopped you?" She looked down at her drink, the ice clinking against the paper cup. "Ranger," she said softly. He didn't let me give up on people. He didn't let me sit in the past. Bill smiled. That dog's got better instincts than most humans I know. They laughed. It wasn't forced. It was real. A few days later, Emily received an email from a nonprofit in Maine that trained canines for therapy and emotional support. They had read her story. They were inspired. They asked if she would consider working with them on a new program, pairing retired service dogs with survivors of trauma. Emily didn't hesitate. She packed her things slowly, savoring every morning walk and every firelit evening at the cabin. On her last night, she walked with Bill to the edge of the dock, watching Ranger swim across the lake like a furry torpedo. "You ready?" Bill asked. "No," Emily said, then smiled. "But I'm going anyway." Maine was quiet, colder, but still comforting in its own way. The organization gave her a small studio apartment attached to their training facility. There, Emily helped match dogs to people who needed healing. Veterans, children, women leaving shelters, firefighters, teachers, strangers who had learned to live with hurt and were finally learning to live beyond it. She painted again, too. Her studio walls slowly filled with pieces, dogs curled up beside wheelchairs, hands resting gently on fur, laughter frozen in brushstrokes. She donated them to the nonprofit. They hung them in their office. Visitors cried often. But one painting she kept for herself. Ranger, running through a sunlit field, wildflowers in bloom, eyes full of joy. One crisp October evening, as she closed up the studio, Emily saw a girl sitting outside the facility, maybe 16, hunched over in a hoodie, eyes rimmed with smeared mascara. A dog sat beside her. Not Ranger, one of the new ones in training. A big, golden retriever named Tucker. Emily sat beside her and offered a quiet smile. "He's been with me all day," the girl muttered. "Like he knows." Emily nodded. "He does." The girl looked at her. "How?" Emily took a deep breath. "Because sometimes," she said, "the ones who've seen the worst in people are the best at finding the good in us." That night, she and Ranger sat on the porch of their little apartment, stars glittering overhead. Emily leaned back, a blanket draped over her legs, hot tea in hand. "You changed my life," she whispered. Ranger shifted closer. Not with barks, not with words, but with the presence. The kind that stays. The kind that doesn't ask questions, just waits. Steady, loyal, true. And so this story didn't end with a kiss. It didn't end with a wedding or a perfect fairy tale. It ended with something better. A vow, not spoken under an arch or printed in gold foil invitations, but made in quiet moments between a woman and the dog who saw her, saved her, and stayed. Thank you for following Emily and Ranger's journey. A story about loyalty, healing, and listening when no one else hears. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had an animal sense something you didn't, and it changed everything? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes our heroes have 4 legs and no words.